Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode where we're going to be looking at the pages from the book of Judges. We're looking at the story of Gideon, and he has been commissioned, he's put the fleece out, he's had his army cut right down, and now he's been called to fight against the Midianites. In the previous panel that we saw last time, God says, "Arise," when Gideon is asleep in the night, and I've got him waking him up, and it says, "Go down to the camp, for I have delivered them into your hand." So Gideon there, and you've got his sons as well in the background actually. So his little boys, they're going to become relevant later on, but he picks up his sword, and he does what he's told. And just like I was talking about last time, where he has the fleece on his shoulders, he's not got that on a second, but he has the threshing device, whatever, I can't remember what it's called, but the item, it's a bit like nunchucks basically in modern day. The flail, that's the word. He's got his flail on his belt as well as his sword. Again, I just thought it was like it's an identity piece in a comic, but it's sort of reasonable that he might keep it when he encountered an angel, being a very significant event in his life. But here as well, God is gracious to him. We know that Gideon has a thing about basically being scared, and it's his thing. Like for Samson, it's his vice, and like with Barak, it's kind of like his connection to what people think of him and stuff, I think. And with Gideon, it's fear. So it says, "But if you're afraid, go down with Purah, your servant, down to the camp, and you will hear what they say." And so, sure enough, he takes Purah. So in this next panel then, we see them scouting out the camp, which is God told them to do. We know from the text that they are, the Midianites have this massive army of 120,000, whatever. They are all camped in the Jezreel Valley, and it's on the other side of Mount Morah. So in the image here, Gideon and his mate, Purah, are on Mount Morah. So they have crept up close to the camp, but they overlook it from on top of Mount Morah. You can see in the sort of foreground then, Gideon and his mate in the bushes, and then in the midground you can see the first few of the tents and everything, and then in the background you can see the valley, which is just filled with people, with these Midianites. It just gives you that idea of the scale, 120,000 people with all these camps and camels. They said more camels than you could count, and that sort of thing. So, and also it gives you that impression of how they're like locusts. There's, all these thousands of them that come in, and they just steal everybody's crops and eat them all. And you can imagine in a way how, in a society where there's no government, police, stuff like that nomads, could easily just come along and take all the settled people's food, and the settled people would have very little they could do about it if the nomads were armed to the teeth or had massive numbers. And so actually it kind of makes sense in a anarchic kind of society. But in the actual background then you can see that Mount Tabor as well, because Mount Tabor is in the centre of the Jezreel Valley where they're camped, and it's also where Deborah was, as I said before. You can see these guys climbing down the side of Mount Morah. I've drawn them climbing down a steep bit because it's less likely then that people would be around, and have a camp and stuff near there. Oh yeah, and there you go, there's the verse. It says they're like locusts, and it says as the sand on the seashore for the multitude. So then Gideon and his dude get closer, and they're still sort of hiding and listening, and then they hear these guys talking, and in the far background, you can see these two little silhouettes on they're hiding behind a rock, but I've drawn them so they're just kind of little lumps, because obviously I don't want it to be too obvious that they're people, or else it would be obvious to the little Midianite dudes. But they're all sitting there, and they're sitting on these tree stumps having a campfire. And one of them comes along and he says about his dream. And obviously God's preordained, again, like that Gideon will be there, and that the guy will have the dream, and that he's going to then say the dream in front of Gideon and stuff. So it's all a lot of providence here, and God again dealing with Gideon's problems. He's scared. Naturally, he's this person who's quite scared. So God gives him this kind of encouragement, basically. And it reminds me of a little saying that I saw on the internet, which is when God gave you a calling, he took your stupidity into account. And I think that with this Gideon story, you can really see that that's the case. He's got a weakness, which is being scared, and he's taken that into account. So the dude's dream is, behold, I saw a cake of barley bread tumble into the camp of Midian and came to the tent, struck it, and it fell and turned it upside down so that the tent lay flat. And then not only is it a weird dream, but the other Midianite dude just kind of like, I've got the interpretation for this dream that Gideon's here to overhear. And he's like, this is nothing other than the sword of Gideon, the son of Joash, the man of Israel. God has delivered Midian into his hand with all the army. So this dude who has the interpretation, he's like, yeah, that's it. Which encourages Gideon, but why they don't report it. But I guess, if you've got an army of 120,000, nobody's going to believe you. But it's so weird that the guy has the interpretation. It's all, as I say, providence, isn't it? So Gideon, when he heard the dream and the interpretation, he worshipped. So here you can see he's worshipping. He's really encouraged as he's hiding behind the rock in the dark. But he then gets the courage to lead the army, and again, this is another sort of turning point. And from this point on in the story, I kind of represent him much more brave and furious and heroic and stuff. And it starts with this frame. This frame is intentionally a parallel of a certain film by a certain Frank Miller, and the comic as well, of course. So in the book 300, the Spartans fight the Persian army, but in that story they take 300 Persians and hold off an army of like 1 million at a pass and all that. And so there's actually lots of parallels, and because it's a very famous comic, and this is a comic, it obviously made sense to use that parallel here. And but it's so many the fact there's 300 and everything. So he looks like Leonidas here, but he's still himself, and you see as well in the background there's 3 of his dudes, and they happen to have spears, a bit like the Spartans have spears, and they happen to have a shield with like a arrowy shape on it. Well, the thing is, the Midianites. No, not the Midianites. The Manasseh people, their symbol is an arrow anyway. So the fact that it's a homage, it still fits with everything that's going on. So you can still see Gideon's ribs are protruding because he's been starved by the actions of the Midianites. But he says, "Arise, for God has delivered the army of the Midians into your hands." He divided the 300 men. And then I've got him saying, into 3 companies, and put them into the and he put into their hands the trumpet and the pitcher and the torch. So in the background I've got Purah there, who's his servant, and also Purah was the one who was with him when he did the cutting down the Ashura poles and all that. So there's a little connection there. But Purah is demonstrating here is the thing, you put the pot on the thing, you hold the horn in the other hand. So he's like, they're getting that speech here. And then they're going to go and kill the Midianites. So next time we're going to have a look at that, with them going up against the Midianites with the 300 men. But we'll leave it here for this one. I hope you've enjoyed this one. If you're enjoying this series, like and subscribe. Also, they should all be appearing in a playlist, so you can go from one to the other. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.